Deaths in Custody Report Act since 2013, written into law, requires all law enforcement agencies, all of them, to report how many people die in custody, based upon that definition that I just laid out to you.
Yeah.
But guess what? They're not reporting it. And if they don't report it, there's no penalty to not report it. So there is a law that requires all death in custody to be reported,
Yeah.
but it's not being reported.
With no teeth.
With no teeth.
It's evident that he cares. What do you care about? Welcome to the Rock Newman Show. It's the Rock Newman Show.
Hello, beloved. I'm Rock Newman, and this is another version of the Rock Newman Show 2.0. Thank you for joining us. I'm not going to do much of an opening this morning. I want to go right to my guest. It is Dr. Roger Mitchell. Thank you, brother. Great to meet you.
Good to see you, Rock.
Great to see you.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Rock. Great to see you.
Roger Mitchell is currently at Howard University. In what capacity?
So I'm the chair of pathology, also the chief medical officer for the adult ambulatory care.
Now, you were the medical examiner in Washington, D.C. for several years.
Yep, for 7 years, from 14 to 21.
From 2014 to 21. And so, I was the medical examiner, and now you're chief.
Now I'm the chair of pathology
Uh-huh.
and chief medical officer for Howard University's outpatient.
Uh-huh, chief medical officer. Mm-hmm. Okay. Roger, tell us a little something quickly about your background. I was at an event where you got an award, and they talked about in introducing you that your grandfather was a medical doctor in Atlantic City.
That's right, great memory.
And he attended Howard.
That's right, great memory.
So, did you want to be, early on, did you want to be a doctor?
Yeah, born and raised from New Jersey, Rock, and my grandfather
What part of
graduated
Jersey?
South Orange,
Okay.
right outside
okay.
of Newark.
Uh-huh.
And my grandfather graduated Howard Med in 1932.
Wow.
He's my mother's father, and so we grew up hearing stories about him. You know, delivering babies on kitchen floors and being that black bag doc that went and saw people, and you know, he just had so much admiration and served so many people. So I connected to his legacy. I was fatherless. My dad wasn't around. Crack cocaine addicted in the 80s.
Wow,
you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
That got him. He's sober now and is one of my best friends. But back then, man, it was just me and Mom. And so I connected to his legacy, wanted to be a doctor. And I went to Howard undergrad, then went to, I did some time with the FBI. I was a forensic scientist there, then left there and did med school back in Jersey, and then went on to become a forensic pathologist and been practicing medicine since about 2006.
So to become a forensic pathologist, what's the training you get to do that?
Yep, so undergraduate, just like anybody else, you know, 4 years undergrad, 4 years of med school, 4 years of residency in pathology, and then 1 year fellowship in forensic pathology. So it's about 13 years of work. And then you got to pass all the boards along the way, all the tests along the way, and then you start practicing.
Man, you said something, and the note I just made here was father reconciliation.
Yeah.
So you said, before that, you said, my father wasn't in my life, he's crack cocaine, the streets got him.
Yeah, streets got him.
The street,
Yep.
the streets got him. For how long?
Oh man, he was in the streets from the time I was 8 to the time I was 22, 23, because that's when I went and got him. He called me, and I went and got him from literally underneath a boardwalk in Atlantic City, and got him into an inpatient and an outpatient program, and he's been sober ever since about '99.
So I know that some of you are out there, men or women, and you're living with a disappointment of a parent not being who you thought that parent should be. And Lord, no one is to judge how you feel.
That's
no one
right.
is to judge
That's right.
how you feel about what your parents did or didn't do. But Roger just said something, Dr. Mitchell just said something, that now his dad is one of his best friends. Yeah. To me, that inherent in that statement is a message of hope.
There it is.
And that however much anger, hostility, frustration, resentment you might be feeling about a parent, that there is the potential for it to come back together in a powerful way.
Yeah, it's interesting because back in 2012, Steve Harvey got word of that story. And so me and my father were on Steve Harvey's show, and about this notion of forgiveness.
Yeah.
And then me and him did his summer program helping young men. And then I wrote a book. This is a book that I didn't tell you about, but it's a book I wrote. It's called The Price of Freedom, A Son's Journey. And it talks about that time when I was a young person dealing with the issues of a fatherlessness, and then what it took to forgive my father. And I'm telling you, forgiveness is a powerful, powerful antidote to trauma.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you, like, during that time, man,
Yeah.
what's the depth of what you felt? What were those emotions? What were those feelings?
Oh, I mean, listen, I mean, when you're a teenage kid or a young child and you don't have a father for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
You're angry.
Yeah.
I mean, and that trauma is real. You don't feel like you have a self-worth. You're working to connect to something that's real. You're challenging yourself to be different. You want to bust out of all the constraints that are being placed on you.
Yeah.
And that's all too ever very familiar for our brothers and sisters that are dealing with either fatherlessness or motherlessness or poverty or lack of access. Whatever those things are gonna create the same feelings in the human, which is inadequacy and fear.
And so, so it's making me think something. I'm actually going off script.
Yeah, we are off script.
But I'll come back.
God is good, though.
I'll come back.
Yeah.
So probably 15 years ago, I was asked to give a speech at Blue Plains, where the kids are incarcerated.
Sure.
And I'm like, okay, I'm fine, I'm good. I think I can tell an inspirational story from growing up poor, with very little and having some degree of success.
Sure.
So I went down, man, and I gave a speech. By nature, I'm a very positive person. Rarely am I down.
Sure.
I spoke that night, and when I was done, Roger, there was a deadness in the eyes of those 8 to 15, 16-year-olds. There was a deadness. I didn't move them at all. And I really got depressed.
Sure.
And I thought it through. I came out of it in a few days. And I talked to some of the counselors there, and they talked about they don't have hope. They don't know who they are. They are hurting. They are fatherless. And what you just described is, so the step from those feelings you just described, it makes no difference to conduct antisocial behavior. It makes no difference because you don't have a love for yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, being antisocial in an environment where you haven't been loved or haven't felt loved is a normal response to not feeling loved. There's
Yeah.
there's an old, and I'm a paraphrase, but an old African proverb is that if young people feel the coldness of their community, they'll burn down their village to feel the heat.
Wow. Wow.
Right? And so, to blame a young person for the circumstances by which they are raised in and are living in, to blame them for behavior that any human, if they're in the same circumstances.
Yeah.
Now there's always outliers.
Sure.
Right?
Sure,
There's
sure.
always ones that are going to succeed
Sure.
despite
Yeah.
their circumstance,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But that is not the norm and shouldn't be. And we shouldn't be saying that people should be able to thrive in environments that are not conducive to thriving. Our job is to create environments that are conducive to thrive.
I say, how can you help the situation?
Yeah, we gotta
Why
do that.
are they acting that way? You know what? We know why they acting that way.
Absolutely. So let's change the circumstances.
Right.
Right? And that's my violence prevention work. So we do violence prevention work when I was medical examiner.
Yeah.
Did a lot of violence prevention work. Still just gave a talk earlier today to violence interrupters and young brothers that are in the Pathways program here in the District of Columbia, coming out of an incarcerated state or justice involved state now trying to move to the next level in their life. And at the end of the day, it's all about now creating an environment where you can recognize the trauma, recognize your own choices and how your choices are been influenced by how you've been treated. That what we call that dropped moment.
Yeah.
As a child, all of us at some point may have been dropped, right? And forcibly bumped our heads.
Yeah.
And so how did we respond to being dropped?
Yeah.
And so we talk through it, and you have to recognize that moment and then understand that you are no longer defined by that moment.
Yeah.
And then make the choices that are necessary for you to get as far away from that moment as possible.
Yeah.
Versus clinging on to that victim mentality, which is often the difficult part.
So, Roger, I want to ask you this question as you're having been the medical examiner. And another word for that, folks, that might be more familiar with is coroner.
Sure.
So, you deal with dead bodies all the time.
Every day. Most days.
Yeah. And, my just curious, uneducated question is, when you do that, how do you prepare yourself when you go home and you're not, because you deal with dead people, you cut on them, you open their bodies, you look at their organs. Just when you go home, how does that not haunt you?
Well,
Or does it sometimes?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a good question, and I'm asked this question all the time, and for some reason, I never really know how to answer it. And I've been asked it my whole career. But the reality of it is that I've been asked, and I'm a big faith guy. I've been placed in this position to do autopsies, to comfort families in their loss, to give an answer when there's an answer to be given.
Yeah.
And I've become responsible for my community that way. And it's a grave responsibility that I take very seriously. And so sometimes I wonder why God picked me to do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I sit on the edge of my bed with my head in my hands, wishing that my brothers weren't getting murdered and me having to pull the bullets out of their bodies. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes the youth, the young people, the old people, the babies, sometimes I wonder why I've been asked to participate in this. But the reality of it is that we made different. He made me to do it, and so I find pride in it. The good thing is I go home to a very, very wonderful, pretty woman too. You know what I'm saying?
That's a good
I
thing.
go home to a woman that, I've been friends with for 30 years, married 21. So I go home to 3 beautiful children. I go home to, a warm home, right? It's funny because I just got back from Africa. You and I talked on the phone while I was in
Yes.
Zambia,
Yes.
right,
Yes.
preparing for this interview. And you know, I was doing a 3-day workshop for medical examiners from all over the world, Africa, Asia, helping them understand the resources that are available to them. And I was walking out, and one of the servers was walking out. I was on my way to the bathroom, Zambian brother. I put my arm around him, and I said, they said this little fat boy from Jersey that didn't have no daddy couldn't do nothing.
Yeah.
And I smiled at him. He kind of understood what I was saying to him.
Yeah.
I said, but now I'm running workshops in Africa.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So that keeps me pushing.
Look
man.
at here, man. I'm connecting something. We're doing this interview from Union Temple Baptist Church, Southeast Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
One of the most Afrocentric churches in the country.
Yeah.
And I did a show. It was called D.C.'s First Family of Faith. Reverend Willie Wilson, his wife, his 2 daughters. One of his daughters has become a senior pastor.
That's right.
The other daughter is the administrator. And they talked a lot about faith.
Yeah.
Everything I just heard you say, you got a lot of faith.
No, listen.
Your faith is your rock.
Listen, my faith is, you know, I'm an ordained minister,
Okay.
Preacher of the gospel. And so my faith is everything.
Yeah.
You know, without him, you know, it's funny because when I first found out my dad was crack cocaine addicted, you know, I went home and, you know, I was home and I was so upset. And I had a male figure, he's my godfather, you know, 2 doors down, my best friend's father. And I called him up and I said, my dad, and I'm screaming, my dad, you know. And he said to me, he said, you know, you have a father. I said, no, I don't. Yeah, you have a father.
Come on. We in church. Come on.
You have a father, and your father is in heaven, and you can talk to him just like you talk to your dad. So at 10 years old, I took that literally. I was coming home. I was a latchkey kid. My mom was working. So I was coming home saying, hey, Dad, guess what happened at school today? And let me tell it. You know, God Almighty was answering, what happened, son?
Yeah.
And I was like, this girl likes me, and this test I got, and literally from 10 to the age to 14, and quite frankly, even today at 48, there's days that I walk in my house and I go, guess what happened today, God?
My Lord. Yeah.
Guess what happened today, Dad?
Yeah.
And he says, what, son?
Yeah.
And so since I was 10 years old, that relationship has been the one that made me say that, you know, even though I didn't have everything, I had something.
Yeah. That's your thread. You know,
there's no doubt about it.
If I can say that's your thread.
No, I appreciate that. I'm glad that it's apparent.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad it's apparent.
So look.
Yes, sir.
I very much was hopeful that we could do this interview.
Sure.
Because I became aware you're coming out with a book
I am.
in a few months. Folks, listen up. The name of the book is Death in Custody: How America Ignores the Truth and What We Can Do About It. And I want to tell you how that connected to me. Is today we see police brutality because there are cell phones and other devices to record their police brutality. Seeing it makes me think about my father, who was born in 1905, my uncles, my brothers, who are much older than me. I've got a brother 20 years older than me. I was born in 52, he's born in 32. During their teenage years, people that I care about, and then to the people that I know, and then so many others who were victimized by a police mentality, their behavior and their culture, and damn it, we never ever got the truth. We never even knew anything about it. When I found out the name of the book that you're coming about, I was like, okay, who's talking about that? Nobody. Who's talking about death in, man, you got me fired up. Death in Custody: how America ignores the truth and what we can do about it. Brother, take the floor and you can take it home from here.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's something we need to think about, folks.
Yeah.
We don't know about it. People are not talking about it. This man right here is going down that treacherous alley.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's funny. You know, my co-author Jay Aronson, he's a PhD, a professor out of Carnegie Mellon, Jewish brother. We met in Toronto at a medical examiner conference, a forensic science conference, and he was doing a talk on mass fatalities post 9/11. I was doing a talk on mass fatality management and how you respond to terrorist acts. And when I heard him and I read his book, I said, wow, you know, you would be a great partner to write a book. And so I in that moment, I said to him, I said, hey, you want to write a book with me? And he said, whoa, we, you know, we don't go there on the first date. That's how he tells the story.
Right.
But, you know, and that was in 2017. And so what we started working on is really looking at the historical arc from the turn of the century, turn of the 20th century, looking at how extrajudicial killings were happening during the lynching period. So we started looking at lynchings, and we started looking at the work of Ida B. Wells, of bringing lynchings into the consciousness of the America.
Yeah.
And how she did it was the collection of data. She started collecting data. She wrote the Red Book, and she started categorizing how lynchings were happening throughout the South and throughout the country. And it was that work that led to other social scientists looking at lynchings, and the government looking at lynchings, and then lynchings falling out of favor. And what we show in this book is this transition from extrajudicial killings in the form of lynch mobs to extrajudicial killings in the form of law enforcement. And still, in the midst of law enforcement and deaths that are occurring in our carceral system, there had been no routine way of capturing the number of deaths that were occurring in custody. And when we talk about in custody, we talk about the different phases of in custody. So we talk about the pre-arrest phase. I'm running after you to catch you, whether in a vehicle or on foot. The arrest phase, when I got my hands on you and I'm putting you in cuffs. Booking and intaking is part of that arrest phase where you're getting brought into the jail. And then the incarceration phase, or the in custody phase, when you're spending months, years, centuries, decades in jail, right?
Sure.
And those, there's deaths that can occur across that continuum.
Yeah.
From the arrest, like we saw in George Floyd,
Yeah.
to the hundreds and hundreds of individuals that are dying from unnecessary natural disease within our carceral system. But right now, and as we sit here in 2023, there is no federal accountable database of how many people dying in custody. So there's a Deaths in Custody Reporting Act. Deaths in Custody Reporting Act is called HR 1447. The Deaths in Custody Reporting Act was authored by Bobby Scott out of Virginia. Yeah, Congressman Bobby Scott. Deaths in Custody Report Act since 2013, written into law, requires all law enforcement agencies, all of them, to report how many people die in custody, based upon that definition that I just laid out to you.
Yeah.
But guess what? They're not reporting it. And if they don't report it, there's no penalty to not report it. So there is a law that requires all death in custody to be reported.
Yeah.
But it's not being reported.
With no teeth.
With no teeth. Let me tell you this. Where I get upset, because I'm a physician, public health provider, where I get upset is that we're asking the Department of Justice to report those deaths. We're asking the wolf to report on the hen house.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, my thing is, who reports all the rest of the deaths in this country? The Centers for Disease Control, the National Vital Statistic Registry. That's who reports deaths in this country, not law enforcement. So why aren't we holding the Centers for Disease Control and the public health infrastructure responsible for capturing these deaths, right? And so how can we do that? We are asking for, and I'm the Speaker of the House of Delegates for the National Medical Association, NMA, which is the oldest and largest group of black physicians in this country. Shout out to the National Medical Association. We're asking for a checkbox to put on the U.S. Standard Death Certificate. That checkbox on the U.S. Standard Death Certificate say deaths in custody, yes or no. So any death that occurs, you can check that box, and that box will allow for you to then look at all the death certificates that are created in this nation to see whether or not that death, no matter from what circumstances, whether or not that death is in custody. And at that point, you can study it. You know how I know it works, Rock? And I know you said I can just go on, but I'll be here forever. You know how I know it works? Is because pedestrians struck and drivers of motor vehicles. We know how many people are dying that are in motor vehicle collisions because there's a death checkbox on the death certificate. Cancer due to smoking. You know how we know? Is because there's a smoking checkbox on the U.S. Standard Death Certificate. Maternal mortality, which is huge in our country right now. We know that our black women are dying at a higher rate when in childbirth. The reason we know that is because there's a checkbox on the U.S. Standard Death Certificate. And so what we're asking for, and it's not going to take an act of Congress. The CDC can do it right now. They can say, we want a checkbox on the U.S. Standard Death Certificate. It can be added, and then we can start collecting the data. Once we can start collecting the data, then we can start developing the prevention aspects based upon age, race, gender, geography, all the things that we need to make this a public health problem.
So those that can change it, those that can help bring about that box.
Yeah.
Have you or you and the folks that you work with approached them?
Absolutely.
And the response has been?
Excuses. The response has been, well, those check boxes don't yield a lot of results. We don't get a lot of compliance with those check boxes. It may take up to 15 years to get that check box truly implemented. I said, 15 years? My people been 400-something years in this country.
Yeah.
I said, and what people don't understand, Rock, is that it's not just black people that are dying in custody.
Yeah.
This is not a black-white issue. There are more white people that are dying in custody than there are black people in raw numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, disparately, we are there more than they are, but our natural disease, our injuries, our suicides that are happening, our homicides that are happening, secondary to the criminal legal system, in connection with the criminal legal system, is we don't even know if it's of epidemic proportions because no one's gathering the data. They're ignoring the truth. And this is the problem. Once we start capturing the data, then we can develop whole research centers that job it is to decrease deaths that are occurring in our carceral system.
Yeah, because, when we talk about police violence, and especially when you go to in custody, the chain of custody, as you say, from putting the handcuffs on, chased them, whatever,
right,
to being fully incarcerated.
Yeah.
So, as part of what I'm thinking is, I don't have any doubt that there have been people in prison that the guards didn't like, the warden didn't like, or whoever it was, and that they told somebody that they know that has a shank, take that person out, and we're gonna give you some benefit, whatever that benefit is. Not to be able to investigate that because the damn box is not on the thing is, to me, you're making so much sense.
And it goes even further, like even if it's not as nefarious, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's not as conspiratory.
Sure. Yeah, right.
Even if the fact that they don't like him because he talks too loud and he's having problems with his blood sugars.
Yeah.
and he's not getting access to insulin or getting access to dialysis, or the dialysis machine is not properly maintained and can't clean his blood the way it should. And so it leads to premature death due to chronic renal disease, right? Whatever the reason is, we don't even know the reasons why people are dying secondary to our criminal legal system. We can only show conjecture. We know one-offs. We know the people that we know has told us. But from a longitudinal, pragmatic, data-driven, public health prevention way, we have no idea how many people are dying.
You got to put some science to it.
You got to put some science to it. And the thing about it is that it creates it to be an objective construct. It becomes objective. And we're not talking about politics, we're talking about people's lives. We're talking about people's lives. And until we start measuring it, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Now, the proportion of blacks per our population, obviously we know we're over proportioned.
In the carceral system.
Massively so.
Sure.
I cannot help but think that this, damn it, has racism stamped all over it also.
Racism is so structural and institutional in this country. There's nothing that's not tainted by it.
That's what I interviewed Neely Foley yesterday. That's what he said.
Well, Neely Foley, listen, I just even say his name while you're talking to me. Is an honor for me.
Man.
At the end of the day, that's what it is. I mean, there's no doubt it's institutional structural racism. And our carceral system is such that, right? It's based upon slave laws.
So it's
right. But our job now is we're deconstructing this thing.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It sounds like it's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
What are you doing to try to chop the hill down?
Well, listen, we're writing this book, Death in Custody: How America Ignores the Truth and What We Can Do About It. It's being published by Johns Hopkins Press.
When's it coming out?
Coming out September 5th.
Okay.
You can pre-order it now. You can go on Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, Johns Hopkins Press directly.
The name is Death in Custody: How America Ignores the Truth and What We Can Do About It.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to use this book to have conversations about it. The National Medical Association is working with Congress people to see whether or not we can put forward a law that requires the checkbox on the U.S. standard death certificate. So we're having conversations at the National Medical Association, bringing together partners to be able to do that. Working on some other things for national research in this area, hoping that I can speak more about that. It's going to be huge if we can get that done. And then really just trying to tell people, reach out to your senator, reach out to your congressperson, and say, listen, you want a simple checkbox on the U.S. standard death certificate that says death in custody, yes or no. And at that point, anybody that signs a death certificate from someone who was during those phases, during those chain of custody that you described, anyone that dies for any reason at all, yes, that's it. And then we have data that we can go to that's researchable so that we can start understanding the epidemiology of deaths that are associated with the criminal legal system.
Throughout history, man, what great leaders have done is they've stepped in the gap. They've stepped in the gap and served. That's what I see you doing with this. God, this is a vacuum, man. This is a vacuum.
Yeah.
They've stepped in the gap, fulfilled a need with passion and commitment. And that's what I see you doing. And just personally sitting at this little table, I want to thank you, brother. And I want to thank you for coming to do the show today.
I appreciate you, man. Bless you, man.
God bless you.
Bless you.
Folks, let me give it to you one more time. Death in Custody: How America Ignores the Truth and What We Can Do About It. We all get touched by this. I would say become aware of the circumstances and the dynamics around this. Dr. Mitchell has labored in the field and is now coming forth, with his book to highlight this is a big problem. And I suggest you take a look. And again, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you,
bless.
Rock. Appreciate you.
Folks, that wraps us for today. Go in peace. God bless. See you the next time.